Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Namely Speaker Mind. My name is Michelle Jarman, and I'm the co-lead of Namely's Women in Employee Resource Group, as well as the lead of the Speaker Mind movement, with co-leads Aaron Rittwager and Indira Totaram. Our mission with Speaker Mind is to amplify the voices of women and share practical and positive steps each of us can take to deliberately build the workplace environments that empower women to achieve their potential. Given the changes that we have all navigated in 2020, it is important to continue to lift our united voices to impact change. We are beyond excited to welcome all of our guests today to our first fully virtual event. And we would also like to welcome our incredible panelists, New York Times bestselling author and speaker, Luvvie Ajayi, and two Speaker in Mind alumni, renowned investor, co-founder, and C-level entrepreneur, Lisa Stone, and chair of Namely's board of directors, Elisa Steele, who will be moderating the conversation. Their discussion will explore the consequences of remaining silent on human rights, gender equality, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace in the midst of the current social climate across the country. Thank you all for being here and joining the conversation. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please submit them in the Zoom chat and we will get to them during our Q&A portion. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Elisa Steele and our panelists.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to the Namely team for putting this together today. I couldn't ask for two better people to talk to about our Speaker Mind agenda today with Lisa and Luvvie here. It's super exciting. And, you know, I spent, I would say, the last weekend and even before that watching and participating in the Love Nation, Luvvie, in learning more about you than even Lisa told me about. And I want to kind of start before we kick off with the important conversation we need to have and want to have today about gender equality and diversity with why the three of us are together having this conversation. How did this happen? And like a lot of great women friendships, it's important that we support each other for the long haul. And, you know, Lisa Stone and I have known each other, I think, since 2002, which is a bit crazy. And actually, Luvvie entered kind of my sphere not too long after that, although I just recently met Luvvie. I could see from afar and from her blogging that started to reach people like me in those days, just huge impact that she could have to culture and to our communities. So I just want to talk real quick, Lisa, for you to start off and share your story about how you started the company SpeakHer way back when, because that led to what Luvvie then turned from a hobby to now. I guess you call yourself a professional troublemaker, Luvvie, but you're actually a professional writer, New York Times bestseller. So we'll say that you're both of those things. Lisa, your quick story?
Sure, super fast. And Luvvie, you know I'm going to get to that dance floor in New York.
Fair, it's only fair.
So
it's gotta have a dance floor, yes.
In 2002, I came back from a fellowship at Harvard University and almost took a job with Elisa Steele. And in fact, said, I can't do it. I'm going to start this company aimed at raising the voices of women. And it's all about blogging and the fact that no one believes we're doing what we're doing. You should check it out. Elisa, you were not a fan. But flash forward, Elisa, Campbell Page, Jay Jardin, and I ended up starting a blogging company, publishing company aimed at raising the profile of women. And in 2010, I was on a dance floor in New York watching Jenny Ekton act out all the single ladies while this woman and I held on to each other like, this is not happening. This mother of six is not shredding the dance floor in a way that we should all learn, right?
Yeah. And that's how we met. And then we ended up finding out that we have the same birthday.
That's right. Capricorn twins.
January 5th, birthday twins. So it was perfect.
And Luvvie, with all that karma, like tell quickly how you started blogging more as a personal passion and now like a New York Times bestseller, putting your blogs into a more traditional format, like the book we'll be talking about today. Oh, can you see the book with the, I don't know if you can.
I'm a hater, yo.
Oh man. Well, anyways, I've got my book and it's earmarked and it's highlighted and it's torn up because it's been used so much. But Luvvie, just quickly, how did that happen?
Yeah, I started blogging 17 years ago while I was in college. It was 2003. I was a freshman. My friends basically peer pressured me to start an online blog. That's web blog is what it was called back then. Like
Yeah.
web blogging.
Right.
And yeah, that blog basically chronicled my undergrad career, random beefs that I was having, exams I wasn't studying for. And once I graduated from college in 2006, I deleted my undergrad blog and started awesomelyluvvie.com and was like, well, I'll talk less about my life in college because I'm not in it anymore and talk about the world as I see it. And blog basically took on a life of its own. And it was this hobby that I didn't take seriously because I was like, it's just this thing that I like to do. I didn't really think it was a career. I didn't really aim to make it a career. It wasn't like a strategy of mine. It was just the blog got bigger and bigger. I got laid off my last full-time job, funny enough, in April 2010, 2 months before SpeakHer. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, 2 months before SpeakHer. And what's funny is the year before, I had convinced my job to pay for a SpeakHer registration for me because SpeakHer was in Chicago in 2009. So that was my first ever SpeakHer was 2009. The year after, I ended up coming to SpeakHer as a speaker. Somehow or the other, I got chosen to moderate the humor writing panel with like Liz Winstead. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of wild. So SpeakHer was actually my second ever speaking engagement.
Wow.
And that SpeakHer is where I met Lisa. That SpeakHer is where I ended up meeting a lot of dope people because it was in New York. It was epic. And yeah, my blog basically just kind of did its thing and speaking got big. You know, my writing got big. Book came out in September 2016. Cliff Notes version. We are here today.
Yeah. And SpeakHer and your story about using a blogging platform to amplify your voice is really just so emblematic of what Speaker Mind is all about. To use your voice and to amplify your voice. And SpeakHer played an important role for blogging for women specifically to have a voice in our culture and to have a voice that could be interacted with and that could be shared and that women together could have these conversations. And again, led to everything you just said, Luvvie, in terms of your career. And I saw you on stage so many years ago, just starting out. So it's wonderful to be together, the three of us today, and have our lives intersect again. Let's jump into some of the topics we want to talk about today with our Speaker Mind community. And one of them is about something you write about very boldly, Luvvie, which is how to be and why it's important to be a domino. And you have this amazing style in your writing that is very easy and fun because you bring in humor to help make hard conversations easier. But at the end of the day, being a domino is super serious because it's hard. It means you're doing something first. It means you're doing something people are going to, as your book says, I'm judging you, that people are going to judge. And then whenever you do something first or hard, it's never universally accepted. So can you just talk to us about this concept that you talk about in terms of being a domino and why it's important?
Yeah, no, I first talked about it in my TED Talk about how being somebody who's constantly speaking up or doing things that are hard is not just because it's from a practice, it's a commitment that we make. But it's also intentional because it's the idea that you being the first person to do or say that thing will inspire other people. So one domino falls, the others fall behind it.
Yeah.
But we're always waiting for that one domino instead of kind of owning it and being that person ourselves. And that's actually why I created a guide called Be the Domino, because a lot of times as people are seeing, truth tellers or people who are bold in this world, people just say, well, that's just how they are. So of course it's easy for them. And telling the truth and doing hard things is literally a practice. It is a muscle. It is not that you are a truth teller today and then that automatically means you're a truth teller tomorrow. No, every moment matters. So you might be somebody who yesterday didn't speak up, but you can start speaking up today. So being the domino is the practice of being the first person, you might have to stand on an island by yourself. You might have to be in the meeting and speak up against the idea first. You might have to, you know, have a tough conversation with a family member who said something insensitive. But in those moments, it's really necessary. So I created a guide called the Be the Domino Guide, the Truth Telling Guide, because I'm a fan of us quantifying our decisions. And how you quantify it, it actually makes your life easier. Turn your decisions to a math equation, right? Like, it becomes less laborious to be like, should I say it right now? I have different things that I do when it's time to be the domino that I'm like, that pushes me forward and lets me know I have to do it no matter how difficult it is. And it's a series of steps that I take and series of questions that I ask myself. That's like, you know, if I do this thing, what is my worst case scenario? Can I handle whatever fallout comes from the worst case scenario? And I think we are constantly giving a lot of credit to the worst case scenario that we have in our heads, so that it will stop us from doing what we're supposed to do that's necessary. We'll be like, oh my God, I'm afraid of the boogeyman. But what if the boogeyman never comes? And actually, a lot of times the boogeyman doesn't come. We should do hard things, because what if the best case scenario happens, right? Whatever the win is that you could get from this, what if that thing happens? But often people opt out of the best case scenario because they're afraid of the worst case scenario that is a phantom that might never come.
And you sure know, right? The things that are worth doing, ultimately, they're not going to be easy. If they were easy, we'd all be doing them. But you have this platform to talk about being a domino and, you know, encouraging others to be a domino, even down to building a guide. So you've created this incredible pressure on yourself, right? So how do you deal with that, in that you've now created this discussion with everyone that you feel like that's what you need to do too, is be that domino?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, I actually realized I didn't even tell people how to get Be the Domino Guide. It's a free guide. Just go to bethedomino.com, download it, live your best life. Yeah, I think I owe myself pressure, because I am a woman who walks in this world and takes up space with a lot of privilege and power. I am a Black woman, so I am a part of 2 marginalized groups, but I'm also a part of a lot of groups that are not marginalized. I am straight, I'm Christian, I'm cisgender, I am not poor. So with that means I have a lot of power that I walk with. And if I don't put pressure on myself to use that power to hopefully make somebody else's life easier, then what is the power for? Yes, it's a lot of pressure that I'm putting on myself, but I have to, right? Because if not me, then who's gonna do it? If I'm constantly thinking somebody else's job is what I'm doing, then I won't do it. And I think that would mean I'm neglecting my responsibilities as somebody who is of power. And I think a lot of us should put more pressure on ourselves. And I don't even think it's more pressure as much as it is an obligation, right? We have to figure out what we have in this world that allows us to not suffer. Okay, how can we use those things to make sure somebody else who is suffering suffers less? How can we use our power to loan our power to somebody else who doesn't have as much? So my job, like, it is not an option that I use my power for somebody else who has less than me. It is a necessity, it's an obligation, it's a duty. And I think it is something that we all need to actually make it our point. You know, even down to, a lot of times you might be thinking, yeah, like, I'm just the intern, or this, I'm just this person. I am a part of some marginalized groups, but what it does is it allows us to share some of our responsibility. We are on this platform today, and the 3 of us have a lot of power. So if we are not the ones being like, how do we use it? Who would be?
That's right. And Luvvie, one of the things that I was really moved by that you told, I don't know if it was in the book or it was in the blog, but was when you moved to America as a young girl, and that you spoke very frankly about, look, I came from privilege. I came from a well-respected family. I came from, and then the list of kind of rights and privileges that you had, and you came to America and your teacher couldn't even pronounce your name, and how that made you feel. Can you share how you worked through that as a young girl and really built your own self-confidence all over again?
Yeah, no, kids adapt, thankfully, right? I think kids are the most adaptive species in this world. And me being 9 and come to the US, and it being the first time I was ever the new girl, the first time anything about it was ever strange at all. it was the first time I'd ever encountered somebody not understanding how I spoke, or my name coming with a, I don't know how to say that. So I also walked in that room with the power that I already had infused in the fact that I never had to deal with that. So although it was a shock to my system, I was very much who I already was gonna be. So I actually protected my name. So when I changed my name, so my first name is Ifeoluwa. When I changed my name, it was like, you guys can call me Luvvie. It wasn't because I was ashamed of my name. It was like, I wanted to protect it from people who would make my name sound ugly, right? So for me, my sense of confidence had to come with knowing that I basically had to be two people, but the person that I was at home was still somebody who I loved, right? So I'd come to school, had a different name, but I would still bring jollof rice to school. Cause I was like, I'm not gonna bring sandwiches if I don't feel like bringing a sandwich. Like, yeah, I don't care if you guys actually make fun of me for it. I'm still gonna bring my rice. So 9-year-old me was still very much like, I know I'm gonna adjust certain things, but this girl, I'm gonna protect her. So I protected what I considered my sacred space, which is my name, my culture, even as I assimilated. And that's because I think my mom didn't really give me a choice. Like, I didn't go back home and then spoke English and, you know, shirked everything I knew. No, it was like at home. I mean, we spoke English, but still spoke Yoruba. We still ate pounded yam. We weren't necessarily trying to exist as anybody but who we are in that space. So I always knew that I had a sacred space to always go back to as who I was. And I think oftentimes the world tells us that who we are is not good enough. And I think when you're 9, when you're 10, you don't want to be different, right? Being different is not what's cute then. So in public and outside, I was like, yes, I will present as much of as American as I could be, but I was always proudly Nigerian, and that esteem carried me through. And honestly, like after college, I was like, you know what? Y'all gonna take all this Nigerianness and deal. Because listen, a lot of the things that make us different are superpowers. So as I sit here today as this writer who wrote this book, I'm like, my Nigerianness informs a lot of who I am. It informs why a lot of people gravitated towards my work, because my humor is very cultural. Like, it's very much steeped in my Nigerianness. My approach to the world is very much steeped in my Nigerianness. Like the bluntness, that's because Nigerians have no chill. So all the things that people love about my work and my career is very much directly tied to that thing that was too different when I was 10. But really, I'm so glad that I didn't let it talk me out of being proud of where I came from or who I am, because it might have changed the writer that you know now if I had let it.
And it's so great because it brings us to this conversation around how differences actually create so much more value than sameness. And differences is what kind of creates that, what you call the superpower. So Lisa, I want to bring you in and ask you, because you've done so much research on this topic around diverse teams, people who are different working together, trying to achieve something. Tell us about the research. You recently published some of it in Forbes. I read about it last week. And it's so compelling around the facts that teams who are different are not only are you creating diverse teams because of human reasons to do that, but you're also creating better business results. Tell us about that.
Thank you. I just want to salute everything you just said, Luvvie. And this is one of the reasons it's been such a pleasure and an honor to work together over the years, because your values and the belief I have that love is how you spend your time, and spending your time on celebrating these differences is so meaningfully because of my background changing the world. And as y'all both know, I have spent a ton of time in boardrooms making business arguments on behalf of intersectional inclusivity, because you used the right magical word there, Luvvie, superpower. Diversity is absolutely a superpower. It is the right thing to do. It is also the smart thing to do. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of the report, as you mentioned, Elisa, that I recently wrote. I synthesized 30 different robust analyses that were the kind of objectively developed reports by investment banks, global consulting firms, academic institutions, and capital associations and firms, all designed to robustly inform decision making. And the net is that the more diverse your team is, specifically by gender and race and ethnicity, which are the two areas that have the most data about them, the more your organization, whether it's a public company or a venture capital fund, is likely to outperform. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. If you, now I'll throw out my own URL because, again, look at the data for yourselves at wrg.vc/diversity. You'll see some of these data. I think many of us have read the data that McKinsey has been publishing over the past decade about the fact that the more robustly diverse your leadership team is, the more likely you are to deliver above average profitability. 36% more likely for racially and ethnically diverse teams, 25% more likely for gender diverse teams. Similarly, Boston Consulting Group has gone on and on about the fact that teams with above average diversity scores by race or by gender tend to drive much more revenue, like nearly half of their revenue in the most recent 3 years based upon innovation. Bottom line, why does it matter? Why does it matter to have more than one race and more than one gender at the table? And the answer is innovation. Homogeneous cultures stifle innovation. Put it another way, you don't just put goalies on the soccer team. That limits your financial outcomes.
So Lisa, you went from CEO in building diverse teams and trying to create great business outcomes to now being an investor. And you could have been an investor at many different firms, but you went to West River Group. Can you share with our attendees the reason you went to West River Group? Because the way that you structurally make sure diversity is built into your investments is really unique.
Oh, yes. So Eric Anderson, the founder and CEO of West River Group, built up a $2 billion diversified financial services and investing firm over the first 18 years and then said, why is 90% of the world's capital managed by men? Shouldn't we bring half of the world's intellectual capital to the table? I think I will design my equity team to be consciously diverse. So we have 4 women and 3 men on the team. We are also diverse by race, by ethnicity, by industry of expertise, by functional experience. We got a lawyer, we got a CFO, we got a CMO, we got a CEO. We have early stage, we have late stage. It's all designed to win, candidly, because it turns out that there are 2 kinds of diversity that are studied in the 30 studies that I'm mentioning, and they're just a limited number of what's out there. But there's inherent diversity, like the diversities that are obvious to the naked eye that Luvvie and I bring to the table. But there's also acquired diversity. This is diversity of different language, diversity of religion, diversity of socioeconomic background, diversity of interest in the world. And it turns out that it's that kind of decision to pull together a team that's going to be constantly banging on each other's ideas in order to build better businesses. That's where the win happens. And each of our funds in healthcare technology and consumer experience is co-led by someone who identifies as a woman and someone who identifies as a man, for starters, but no 2 partners is alike.
And thanks for that, Lisa. And Namely, who's hosting us today, is a company prides themselves on the culture of diversity. And Luvvie and Lisa have met through this process, the team behind the SpeakHer Mind discussions, which is a grassroots organization in the company who self-organized for the things that were important for them, and then got the support of the organization, the CEO, the team, even customers, to have these conversations. So I'm going to bring it back to you, Luvvie, because sometimes these conversations aren't easy. As a matter of fact, kind of the most important things to talk about tend to be uncomfortable or not unanimously agreed upon or difficult to bring up out of fear of not saying it right. And you have your little mantra about when you're going to say something, how do you defend it? Can you share that with us? Because I've sort of adopted that for myself. I didn't even realize I adopted it for myself, but when I saw you talk about it in one of your interviews, I realized, aha, that's how I can check myself that I need to speak up and that I can't be silent.
Yep. So again, quantifying my decisions, right? When it's time to say something that feels tough, I ask myself 3 questions. And if the answer is yes to all 3, I do it, right? And deal with whatever comes. Because I know that if I do my checkpoint, I'm not being impulsive. And if I do my checkpoint, then it's pushing me forward and letting me know that, like, this is your responsibility. So my 3 questions are, do I mean it? This first one is really important because sometimes you might catch yourself talking just for talking's sake. Don't do it. This thing that you want to say, do you actually mean it? Is it something you actually believe? 2, can I defend it? So if you're challenging something, challenging somebody else, expect to be challenged. And when you do get challenged, do you got receipts? Do you have ways to actually defend and stand in what you just said? And that's important. Just expect to be challenged, but be ready to give a response that justifies what you just said. And then 3, can I say thoughtfully or with love? Now, this allows it because the messaging can go left depending on how you do it, right? And if you're not saying it thoughtfully, or if you're not saying it in a way that will honor the other person, or if you're saying it in a way that's going to demean them, or are you using something hateful in terms of a slur or a word or a phrase in there? So the message, no matter how accurate it is, gets thrown out the window. So do I mean it? Can I defend it? Can I say it thoughtfully? If I can do all of that, I'm like, you know what? Make it happen. And then we'll deal with whatever comes. Now, oftentimes people think, well, I already did my part. I did my 3 checkpoints, but they still didn't like it. You can't control what people are going to think about your product or your services or your ideas. Divorce yourself from that end goal of people are going to love what I'm just going to say. No, your job is to do what you're supposed to do, and that's it. However way people receive it is out of your hands. And I think we're constantly waiting to know it's going to be received so well before we say or do the thing. But it's like, that's not your job. You can't control other humans. And they don't also have to receive it well, right? Misunderstandings happen. We're all different people. We come into every room with different baggage and different projections that we might send. So it's also being clear that no matter how thoughtful you try to say it, somebody might not like it. But again, were you true to yourself? And I think that also lets me understand that, like, at the end of everything, I want to always be able to be proud of myself and know that I didn't leave rooms without saying what I was supposed to, or I didn't leave my job for somebody else to do. So this also lets me know I did my job. I've done my part, and now I can actually just walk with that confidence of knowing that at least I did what I was supposed to do.
And so that goes in, the handbook, those 3 questions for me. It goes in my handbook, like for myself, that's how powerful it was for me. Do you mean it? Can you defend it? And you're going to say it with love, not with something that's going to make it so polarizing. And if people don't agree with you, that's okay, as long as you really go through those checkpoints.
And the thing is, you can make a decision to also ignore yourself, right? If you ignore yourself, be clear of the consequences that might come.
That's true. That's absolutely true, because that actually could be worse than speaking up, which is why we came together to this, silence serves no one, because it doesn't achieve anything. So you said something a couple minutes ago I want to jump into around, we're not all the same, we're all different. And we're actually not, as a group, whether it be a group of Black women, a group of white women, a group of women of all sorts of races, or whatever it may be, we're not actually striving for sameness. We're striving for equality. We're striving for the opportunity to be equal for everyone who wants to step forward and put forth. And so this concept of diversity is so important, because it comes down to, individual empowerment and really creating the openness and the equality to fight to have choice in life. This is what I tell my daughter, who I hope is here on the webinar today. What you want to do in starting early in life is create choice for yourself, and you create choice by making decisions early about what you believe in, what you're going to fight for, what you want to do, how you create independence. And all of that leading up to, Luvvie, advice you can give to white women when you talk about them having privilege, which we do. How do we open doors? How do we be better? The title of your book is I'm Judging You, but really it's Do Better, right? Your subtitle is the Do Better Manual, right? It's challenging all of us to be better and do better. And as we talk about this group Speaker Mind, which is all about, you know, women and how we bond together as a group, all sorts of women from all different backgrounds, how do white women do better for Black women?
Yeah, I think white women need to do better by stopping the obsession with being nice. I find that people are obsessed with the concept of, I just want to be nice. And if I said that thing, I wouldn't be nice. Nice is pointless. I want to just go on record to say this. Nice is pointless. Kind is what you should aspire to be. And I don't think there's anything kinder than using your power for somebody else, right? For somebody else's greater good. And what's kind, the truth is kind, right? Challenging what's not okay is kind. Advocating for somebody who's not in the room to hear the conversations that's happening is kind. And we're so obsessed with nice of, I want people to like me, that we won't challenge the rooms that we're in. We won't challenge the people around us who actually take our words as bond and say, you know what, if that person says it, I can believe it. So instead of aiming for the kind, which is fighting for a world that's better for you, for your kids, for me, for the people you might never meet, white women often will try to be nice and say, I'm just trying to get the harmony in the room. But here's the thing is, if there's no justice, there's no harmony. I don't care how nice a room can be. If there's no justice and if there's anything unfair happening in that room, it's not harmonious. So it's a fake thing. It's like surface level. So I'm just like, white women can get kind by insisting that any room that they are in is being just, not just to somebody who looks like them, but to the person who you might not think of, the person in the wheelchair, for the person who's Black, for the person who's gay, for the person who's queer, who's trans, like, and then knowing that if I'm at the table, and that's one thing I always want to make sure happens, is if I am sitting at a table, the things that come out of that table while I am in the room have to be something I have to be able to vouch for. So how I choose to be kind in those moments is to make sure, how can I stand and defend what happened here? Because if my silence is then challenged later on, then I can't defend that. I can't say, yeah, silent actually makes sense. So I want white women to take themselves out the idea of niceness. The world is where it is right now because so many people tried to be nice. It meant we didn't do the work we were supposed to do. It meant we didn't challenge the systems we were supposed to do. We weren't challenging the people who are close to us. We're always talking about, you know, talking on and saying Black Lives Matter on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but that doesn't matter that you said it on Instagram if you haven't said it to your parents. If you haven't said it to your friends, if you haven't said it to your colleagues who made a racist joke. So instead of constantly seeking out this niceness, let's insist on being kind to everybody. And that kindness is going to look like having tough conversations. It's going to look like challenging people in systems that are bigger than you. It's going to look like sometimes standing on an island by yourself in a meeting when the idea is not thoughtful and does not include everybody it should and doesn't take everybody's stories into account. So be more kind.
More often than not, the people in the room are the people with the power, and the people who need the support are the people who are not in the room. So although I like everything that you said, my biggest takeaway is, what are you doing for the person who's not in the room? Yes. Because their voice isn't there. Yes. And I'm going to take your comment about, hey, it's a mathematical equation. I'm going to actually throw it over to Lisa, because she's come up with a way that I'd like her to give us a quick snapshot of. Since her firm is diverse by design, you've actually come up with a way to do KPIs differently that prove better results, that really kind of support everything that Luvvie just said. Lisa, tell us about that.
Well, I'm going to try to support a large part of what Luvvie just said. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to handle the supporting all of it in a single comment because that was quite the amen treatise. I think that there's three things occur to me, Elisa, to that point. One of the interesting things that has occurred to me all along, and Luvvie and I share this value Elisa has with data and statistics, is that it's really important not to be acting out your own hypocrisy and losing control of the situation. Here's a great example. So going back to SpeakHer days, we had a constant challenge. We were trying to create a global stage to raise the profile of women using technologies to get their voices heard. Now, the challenge was that not everybody is a well-known public speaker. So how do you create an event where people are interested to come and listen without constantly recycling the same voices at the same event? So we set a standard. I'm not going to say it's a target, and don't you dare ever use that keyword quota with me. We set a standard that 85% of our speakers every year were going to be new. And immediately, almost immediately, and obviously Elisa, Jory, and I were locked in on that, our conference became known for the hot new voices. Now, mind you, we weren't idiots. We didn't change up our moderators by 85% every year because we all know not everyone needs to be running the conversation. Not everyone's Elisa Steele, right? Or Luvvie Ajayi. But what we did, it made a robust difference. Now, flash forward to what we're doing as a partnership. We're already finding that our non-overlapping networks and former colleagues are creating better deal flow, greater number of opportunities, more unique and different inbound opportunities, both to fundraise for our funds and to place dollars. And so each one of us is tracking on a timeline and on a pipeline exactly who's coming in, from where, how we're doing it. And we are looking very specifically, back to the data I shared, who is in the leadership at these organizations. And so our goal is to make sure that we have as fat a pipe of incoming brilliance as we can. And because so few, 90% of the venture capital dollars that were placed last year went to white men. So already, just by having the conversations with entrepreneurs who are wildly more diversified, we are creating an opportunity to outperform according to the numbers.
Yeah.
And so it's about opening up the opportunity. And I think that gets back to what, Elisa, you and I have talked about ad nauseum, which is if you're someone who is a white woman who has clawed your way up to a certain position, particularly in the financial world or in technology, the skills that got you there aren't necessarily going to be the same skills that make you the most capable of taking on a student aspect. Because I think that leadership through listening is what the situation now calls for.
Yeah, and we had this great discussion that I want to share, which is, you find out through all of the things you're fighting for, whether it's in your career, for your family, or for justice, or for equality, that you're using your voice as loudly as you possibly can. And then we suddenly hit this wall and realize, actually, what I need to do is stop and listen and really absorb and hear with empathy and shared understanding of what's really happening. And sometimes that's hard because you're not, I think, Luvvie, one of the things you said, you didn't say it outright, but one of the things you said was, you're not always going to get the support from everyone to do those hard things. And it just made me remember a moment. I was standing in my kitchen watching an interview with you on YouTube where you talked about having meetings with yourself. And the reason I laughed out loud is because I do that all the time because you got to pep yourself up. You got to get ready for what you think you want to go accomplish. And you know that it's not going to be easy. And I know that you were kidding, but
I wasn't.
I want to ask you, I actually do that. Tell me, or tell us.
I wasn't kidding.
Yeah.
Have a meeting with yourself. Why not? And sometimes my meeting with myself means I play music that pumps me up. Sometimes meeting with myself is I'm literally like, okay, all right, so let's go into this thing. This is what I want to accomplish. And I might even write some notes down for myself. Like, okay, here's the 5 things I want you to say, if nothing else. Like that gives me the clarity, because when I walk in the room, if I'm trying to get clarity once I'm there, I'll get all like, I don't know. So if I already walk in with certain amounts of clarity, when I speak, I'm already clear on what my points are going to be, what my goal is when I want to walk out that room, and who I want to speak to specifically. Because sometimes my meeting is to be like, so you're about to take on this person. And yeah, to your point, there's going to be times when you're not going to have support in what you're going to say. You're going to be by yourself, and you're going to be like, should I do this? Do it. And here's the thing about the consequences. Sometimes they will come. I've lost a speaking engagement because I challenged the white man who asked me to come speak when they sent me the poster. It was a keynote for a major company, and they were like, oh, we're doing this great day of speakers and it's going to be really diverse. And I was like, okay. So I signed the contract. Once I got the sheet that had everybody's pictures on it, literally was me and 8 white men. And I was like, so what part about this was diverse? Is this about like them going to different colleges? Like, what part of diversity does this look like? It was straight. It was just weird. And I called it out, and he got offended. He got offended and said, well, we'll just wait till next year to have you. Well, I already had my deposit. So thanks. But it was interesting because in that moment, I didn't have backup. I had to go against this dude by myself. And I knew that. And I get backup from my girls. So the other thing is, after you have the meeting with yourself, have a meeting with somebody in your life who loans you strength when you don't have it. So call that friend or your mentor and be like, so I'm about to do this thing. Do you think, like, I'm kind of afraid? And have somebody else pump you up and say, yes, you're actually correct. I'm glad you're doing this. Your voice is necessary. So do what you need to do to have the infusion of courage when you're walking into these hard situations. So by the time you walk in there, you're already pumped up. So you can do what you got to do.
Oh boy, you bring up such a perfect point for us as we're going to get to some of the questions. I see the questions coming in. We'll get to some of them in just a couple seconds. But Luvvie, this concept of leaning on your network, like we couldn't emphasize that enough. Sure, have the meeting with yourself, get yourself pumped up. It's actually maybe another way to say, get your homework done, like be ready, because you got to answer those 3 questions you talked about earlier. But lean on your network, because I remember earlier in my career, I didn't really understand that women were going to support women. There were just so few of us, and at least the companies I worked in, that I didn't know we were part of a team together. But we are part of a team. It's actually a really a big foundation of how Speaker Mind was founded, was around how do we help and support each other. And you need to do that to not be alone and to handle big things. So we're going to move to the last question, and then we're going to get to some of the audience's questions. But the last question has a lot to do with some of the things Luvvie and Lisa have talked about along the way here, on how we actually support change. And one of the signature elements of Speaker Mind that the team at Namely holds us accountable to is, how do we actually make change happen after having these conversations? Not just having the conversation, but actually make change happen. And yes, Luvvie said, oh, Instagram is nice, and Facebook, whatever you're doing in your big, huge social media following. But the reality is nothing specifically changes for someone's life unless we do something. And so I want to close our discussion with an idea or concept from each of you on, after this discussion today, what would you specifically recommend to the folks who are here listening that you think they can do to make a difference for tomorrow or the next day, this week, not next year and not some kind of social media post, but something in somebody's life? Who wants to go first?
I will say everybody has at least one tough conversation they've been putting off, whether it's with their boss, with their sister, with their mom.
That's a good one.
And you keep on finding excuses not to have that conversation, but that conversation keeps sitting on your shoulders, and you feel guilty because you haven't had it and you haven't figured out the courage to do it. Let this be your courage. This week, have that tough conversation, because if it's something that has stayed with you for this long, if it's something that you are compelled, that will not leave you alone, it means you're probably supposed to do it. So that tough conversation, that truth that you need to tell this person, productively, thoughtfully as you know how, and that's really your job. Do it now. Stop procrastinating on it. And I think that will start getting you in the practice of saying tough things, even beyond the small rooms, right? So yeah, that's what I want people to do today.
And don't you have a methodology for that, a truth-telling guide? You want to comment?
So so go to bethedomino.com. Download the truth-telling guide. In there, it actually walks you through when it's time for you to have the tough conversation, when it's time for you to say this tough thing, the things for you to consider. I want you to even write it down, and it's in there. It's basically a workbook on telling the truth. So when it's time to have this tough conversation, you can actually go in your workbook, see what you've already said and filled out, and be able to say it. So you walk in there with support. So I have no shame about writing down my thoughts before I have talks with people. Like, I'm not freeballing everything all the time, especially if I know that I have very salient points to make. I will tell even my husband and say, okay, so I wrote notes on this argument we're about to have.
He doesn't have a chance.
If I don't write notes, I get derailed. So I'll show up to our kitchen counter with a notepad and be like, okay, so point one. And it allows us to be more productive because I'm not being distracted. So yeah, that's why the truth-telling guide is really helpful, because you can actually have your notes down on the truth you want to tell and start doing it, because it's never going to get easy where you today, hard conversation day. Nobody really likes having hard conversations. They're called hard conversations for a reason.
For a reason, yeah.
But the difference between the people who do it and the people who don't is the people who do it feel like they have no other choice but to push through the discomfort. They have no other choice but to be like, yes, this scares me. I don't like it. It's yucky. It feels gross, but I got to do it because the opposite feels even grosser. Me being quiet about this does not sit well in my spirit. And then we do it.
Get motivated to get on the other side of it.
Yep.
Hey, Lisa, how about you? You've had this concept of a personal board of directors. You're not just female, but your female network. What's your kind of action item for everybody today to make a difference?
I'll build on what Luvvie was saying with regard to the need for, as you put it, Luvvie, white women to be less nice. Nice is a metaphor for comfortable, right? And I think I urge people to be as honest as they can with the people who are honest back. My personal board of directors, and you are both on it, are people who will call me out on my own PR and let me know when I need to work harder on something or focus on something or improve. But the other thing that we can do today, thank God for social media, is it's time to get out of your comfort zone, I think, and start listening to, following, watching, and resharing the people you admire who are saying the things that you are trying to get comfortable with saying. So if there's a step for you before having that hard conversation that I think Luvvie's right, you should have with your mom, your boss, your colleague, what have you, go out and learn Instagram and Twitter and reshare the people you're listening to who you think are brilliant, who are saying what you want to say. Yep. I do think leadership is listening right now. And I would start, I'm a huge fan of the Speak Her Mind series, and I want to just give props to Michelle and Indira and Aaron for their leadership here. It's my second time back. It's been such a pleasure. I also think that Luvvie's books are so important. Go buy the first book and memorize it. Go download the Do Better Manual and sign up for the next book. This is important work. That's
so Lisa, there's a question, and keep to the audience, keep throwing your questions in. We're going to do as many as we can in the next 10 minutes, but there's a question I think you've answered, but I want to ask it out loud, that an attendee is asking about CEOs, and is there one action for CEOs specifically that they can take to make meaningful advancement? And your comment about listening, can you talk about that as it relates to CEOs in today's world? So different than even 5 years ago.
3 things. Number one, if you put performance metrics on standards for diversity in your own organization into your own job description, and you put them into those of your executive team, your company will function differently. Putting it on yourself and making it a shared value that you have the most innovative team possible, which means not just shortstops on the baseball team. That's number one. Number two is events like this, where you are actually demonstrating vulnerability. Here you are, Lisa, you're the chairman of Namely, and you are asking questions about the toughest topic in the United States today, race and intersectional inclusivity. That's leadership. So have those hard conversations or those book groups in person. And then number three, start getting together with people who are half your age at lunch and then shut up and listen.
Yeah, that's a good
Trust
one.
me, they'll teach you about social media, if nothing else.
And okay, so switching topics, this is a big one. Luvvie, I'm sending this over to you. There's someone who specifically wants to know if you have additional feedback about how men could and should support Black women.
Oh my gosh.
Like, we'll just ask that with 7 minutes to go. But we did talk a lot about women to women, and I asked you specifically about white women to Black women. So I think this question begs some thoughts from you about what do you need from the men? What do Black women need from men? Men, white men, Black men, however you want to classify it.
So the problem with men is not that they want to be nice. They're just, one, oblivious, willfully obtuse about some of our problems and just don't see it as theirs to take care of. So how men can be present for women, listen, like Lisa's been saying, that's one. But y'all wield so much power in this world. Like, you hit the power jackpot, especially white men. You say go, people are going. You make a phone call and you can change the way a company looks. You give somebody a blurb in their book and all of a sudden their book sells 20,000 more copies. So men have to see themselves and see the issue of justice and equality in the world as a them issue. It's not just a woman issue. We didn't create the problem. So the fix is really from their side. So honestly, listening and having a full understanding of what the patriarchy actually means, what systems mean, because men can tell you about racism sometimes, and men can tell you about all these other systems, but when it comes to patriarchy in their heads, they're like, I don't understand. And I'm like, it's the same, but on steroids. So yeah, men can listen and actually act, right? Call your boy and say, hey, this person needs a position, they're qualified for it, and I think they should get an interview. And you'll be able to get this person an interview just like that. So if you're gonna do nepotism, consider using some of your nepotism for some of the smart women in your life.
Yeah, the power that you have as a man in the positions that many of them have can change the life of so many people. And it could be a man, it could be a woman, it could be a Black man, it could be a white woman. So use that power to help us make some change. Use that power to create more diversity, because every single person makes an impact on that. And to the point of difficult conversations, I know from other companies I'm involved with, and not just Namely, not only Namely, but other companies, men in very big positions who are trying to listen and having those meetings are hearing things that are really uncomfortable. And they've opened up to listen, and now they don't know what to do because these issues are really tough. And so as you see men who are opening those conversations and being good listeners, Luvvie, the ones who are already being good listeners, help support them after, because they're not sure what to do with the information, not sure how to take action that's not going to create more issues for them. So we want to take them all the way through to support for change. So I think that question was a big one, and could even be its own Speaker Mind topic for another day. So we have time for one more question. And this is about time or space to recharge. This is hitting us all. I mean, on top of kind of the world we were already living in, and then the pandemic, and then all of the other things that have happened in our climate, it is really hard being cooped up, being somewhat quarantined, going through all of these issues, somewhat alone because we're all virtual now. This attendee is asking your advice from Lisa and Luvvie. How do you allow yourself the time and space to recharge? Any tips and advice on that?
I schedule it now. I schedule my rest. I now start scheduling self-care because I'm just like, you know what? I got to do it. I got to make myself pause because the one thing I adhere to is my calendar. So if my calendar says I have to do this, then I have to do it.
So what does your calendar say? Does it say meditate? Does it say go for a run? Does it say take that bike out? What does it say?
I just put lunch on my calendar to make sure that every day I have 1 hour where I'm actually not in front of the computer and I might just be sitting on the couch. Some days I'm just like, yes, 1 hour to do something random. Or lately I've been playing logic puzzles on my iPad and doing adult coloring books. So I'll just block out an hour where I know no work needs to be scheduled for that time and I get to do whatever I feel like doing without guilt.
Okay, that takes a lot of discipline. Great advice. Everybody mark their calendar for self-care. Lisa?
I think it's time to hit the weight room, y'all. People who don't have to be dying or dying because of some of the structural problems, the institutionalized racism in our society. That's, to me, not a political issue. That's an issue of who we are as a nation. And so I've been hitting the weight room because this is a muscular exercise in saving ourselves and being the leaders that we want to be.
Yep. So, strong is mental and strong is physical. That's great advice.
I don't know how to show up.
I don't know how to thank Lisa and Luvvie because you're both so just incredibly insightful, thoughtful, caring. And you know, Luvvie, I'm sorry. You're not nice. You're kind. So you're following your own advice, and I love it. I want to bring Michelle Yarman back from Namely to close us up with a wholehearted Namely thank you. But personally, Luvvie and Lisa, this has been an incredible hour for me, and I know for many people, men and women who attended today. Thank you. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to Luvvie and Lisa again for a wonderfully engaging conversation today. And a huge thanks to our Namely family and all the guests who joined our conversation today. We'd also like to thank our Namely CEO, Larry Donovan, and our head of people, Amy Roy, for their support and encouragement with this event. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. So follow the hashtag SpeakHerMind for more information and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.